Welcome to the 45th Ask the Chief Forum. I guess it should say NSTHA, Ask the Chief Forum. Anyhow, we have a varied selection of questions in our log right now. And so we're just going to get started and get going with the first question. Spin the wheel.
Number 4.
Okay, number 4.
Mhm. Question number 4 is, can box heads be rehabilitated?
Okay. Well, the answer to that would be yes, since everyone who's a current member was a box head before they became a member, which means that through opening up and expanding how you see things, how you look at things, and supporting your, I should say, right or ability to do that, causes you to be less of a box head and then eventually not a box head at all. But if you're actually interested on your own after a certain point in just knocking down those walls, then I would say that you cease to be a box head. You're just someone who's breaking out of the boxes. So I would like to think that my members are individuals who are breaking out of the boxes, who are no longer box heads. So yes, box heads can be rehabilitated. And again, like anything else, it just has to do with whether that person has the desire to expand their knowledge, expand their awareness. Okay, I think that's pretty much to the point, I think. Unless someone has any questions that want me to elaborate any further, I don't know exactly how to elaborate any more than that. But we'll just go on to the next question and spin the wheel.
Number 7.
Number 7.
7 is, what are Chief thoughts on acupuncture in Chinese medicine?
Okay. Well, I definitely favor it because it's based on energy. So even though there's some dispute amongst those on the other side as to whether chakras exist or not, but literally these are points on the body, the avatar, where they use some acupuncture needles to trigger and to connect certain points, but it has to do with the flow of energy. And through my understanding of it over the years, there's various views on exactly how it works, but I know that some practitioners talk about releasing blockages by using acupuncture needles. And when it comes to the whole concept of energy, there's also these concepts having to do with what they call the kundalini, that the energy flow up the back, the spine. If anyone's interested in trying acupuncture, I would suggest, if you're going to try anything, that you should do some research on it just to see what the philosophical views are behind it, and basically how it works. But the interesting thing about acupuncture and Chinese medicine is that Chinese medicine has gotten a lot more press than other cultures who literally do something very, very similar. There are countries in Africa who do something similar to acupuncture, having to do with connecting energy and the flow of energy. There is in the Hindi background. There's also those who work having to do with energy and how the flow of energy. Some views of that energy's connection to the universe with these particular practices. Also, ancient Egypt there was the use of energy. And the interesting thing about it is that the process that they use is similar to some of the processes I use, having to do with energy in the hands and moving energy with the energy that's in the hands, which is literally all of you have had sessions know that that's how I tend to work a lot of the times, by moving energy and pulling energy using my hands. So there are a lot of a number of cultures who use something similar to Asian techniques, medicine, also herbs and things like that. Those cultures use herbs as well. Um, as far as like how maybe China got more press, maybe it's because I'm just hazarding a guess that China was more resistant to Western um, domination. China still controls China, and China is influenced by China. And that's why the West, because they're imperialist, anyone who goes against their imperialistic ideas are bad. Instead of realizing all those have been dominated by imperialism, look at it as imperialist as bad. But it's a big mess, literally. The whole thing of moving in, erasing cultural practices and so on, to replace it with something that is literally, I say, amenable to something else that really wants to squash anything that will keep a consciousness connected to something, I say, more. Now, even within these practices of movement of energy, that there is a connection to the reality that the universe is energetic, that everything in it is energetic, all the way down to the smallest pebble, all the way down to the smallest insect. It's all energy. And with that said, I the basis of everything that exists is energetic consciousness. So when you look in the mirror, when if you do what I say, you keep that mirror covered most of the time. When you have to look at it, that individual, if you're not looking at something that's on the other side, that's not you, that you're looking back at, is literally something of a reflective energy created by, I would say, the mind in a sense. So what you're looking at is what I call a glamour. And in this, they have fixed glamours. They put you in, it's like putting you into a computer program that has a bunch of rules and a bunch of walls to keep you within that program. Things on the outside of the program who have no desire to have a human experience because it's extremely limiting. And also, you're basically more or less guinea pigs and whipping, well, not to be sexist, but whipping boys more or less. They're just something to basically beat the essence out of in more ways than one. Be physically beaten out, psychologically, beaten out of you or drawn out of you. But they limit these other practices because it expands you a little bit too much. If everything is energetic, if this energy is flowing through me, whatever the system is telling me, or the AMA, who show up with their backpacks full of pills and pharmaceuticals, to tell you that this will fix. We just haven't found the right pill yet. We haven't found the right vaccine yet to fix a problem that they create. But in the end, where I'm trying to get to, when I'm kind of meandering a bit, is that at your core, you're consciousness. You're consciousness first before you're anything. Your consciousness before this became an idea, the matrix, the things you see and all the things that come along with it. You're just consciousness that have been under siege and have been attacked and literally contaminated by the whims of some others who have a better idea of what this existence is than you do at this point. That's why you have certain things that kind of move in and out of spaces, things they call ghosts and so on and all that. It's all performance designed for one thing, to get the things that they don't want you to really believe in, even though people talk more about it now in the last 20 years. They talk more about energy. You talk about it more. It's been around and it's been a concept for a long time, hundreds of years. But as far as like Western type modern society, it's been growing more that, that energy. It's about energy. It's energetic. Even when I was, I say, in my 20s and whatever, and I did a lot of, searching around for alternative information and so on. You wouldn't hear anyone when they would talk about ghosts, spooks, and whatever. And in the West, they would always, I don't believe in it, and so on and so forth, blah, blah. But there are those, I don't know exactly where they're getting that information, said, well, the ghosts are there to scare the energy out of you, to feed on your energy. Now, I can't tell you when I started here, but it's more recently, I would say within the last 20 years, and that to me is recent, that I started to hear that as a subject, as certain individuals, not everybody buying into it, because again, there has to be someone to try to hold the line for imperialistic ideas, to break you away from anything that will connect you to what is really your origins, what is really you. So if you think you're a woman first, you think you're a man first, you think you're a certain racial group first, you're wrong. You're all wrong. You're a consciousness first. All of these things are expressions. And when you're in the matrix, they use these expressions to pit you against one another. Now, I was looking up duality, the whole idea of good and bad, and so on. And there's been a lot of studies over the decades, over the years, with people talking about duality. In other words, good and bad. And there are some who literally pretty close on the mark. They said, well, good and bad is a human concept. That in their mind, it doesn't really exist. And there's also the yin yang symbol from the East. And theirs is not so much that, that bad is bad, good is good. They believe that they both work in tandem, which, if you think about it, words from other cultures are maybe in most cases misrepresented in English. So they may have a word for yin yang, about balance and flow, when a more stilted English interpretation is good and bad. Now, whether I buy into the yin yang or not, that's neither here nor there. I believe in balance. There are things that are in balance and there are things that are out of balance. I don't need a fixed symbol. Because if you're home in Supreme Consciousness Universe, you don't need a fixed symbol. You have an understanding of how things flow. So from the vantage point of those, I would say, who are light outside of this realm, this is a realm of extreme imbalances. The whole concept of good and bad. There are people who say, I'm a good person. So really, are you? There are those beings on the other side who will say, well, the whole concept of good and bad is really a joke. I said, because this system is designed for everything to feed on everything. So someone who has more energy can feed on someone with less energy. Therefore, the less energy being fed on by the one with more energy I'm being victimized. I'm a good person because I can't feed on him. But then they turn around and I don't know if you've ever seen a situation where a little kid gets, chastised by their parent. Like a little girl gets chastised by her parent and she's sent to her room. And then she goes to her room and she gets her little dolls out. And then she starts chastising her dolls. She felt like the victim, but then she victimizes something that she feels has less power than she has. That's what works here. That's what goes on. And I used to, when I started having a lot of sessions with people, I would say, well, someone's feeding on your energy. And then, I knew someone feeding on my energy. They were always feeding on my energy. And I said, whoa. Don't, claim and grasp that victim, flag so quickly. I said, did you complain to others about your situation? Well, yeah. I said, then you're feeding on them. You're changing their mood by complaining. You're taking their essence by complaining. And a lot of complainers are so fixated with their complaining, they don't realize at times there are people who make themselves not available. Well, so-and-so's been busy a lot, because that person and their jockey says this person is like tapping us out, man. They're feeding. Everyone feeds here. So if any of you think that, oh, I'm a good person, that's why good and bad, to me, it doesn't matter. It's about imbalance. Are you out of balance, which everyone is here, or are you trying to get into balance? My work is trying to bring balance and introduce you into balance, which is where you originally came from as consciousness first. So again, that took a little bit of a journey there. It's all from the energy and how energy, and those who practice like Eastern healing processes and things like that. But again, everything is connected. That's how I tend to flow from one subject to the other, and kind of easily. But again, in order to really be real about where you are and what your experience is here, understand that no one is, I would say no one is not guilty, trying to find another word, of victimizing some other individual. Or you'll say, well, I don't victimize other people. Well, most people do. And if you're not strong enough to victimize that person, they also will victimize an animal. They'll take their anger out on their dog or something. So you get angry and say, well, I was angry, and yeah, well, that's no excuse. You're just out of balance, and you're trained to be out of balance. So just observe when you feel certain ways, or when someone, uh, pisses you off or intimidates you. How do you respond to that? So anyway, I'll leave it there for now, and we can move on to the next question and spin that wheel.
Oh. Number one.
Okay, number one. Well, it'll be fixed on the final video. But anyway, number one. Who has number one?
The question is, what kinds of programs keep people as a boxhead? Curious about religion.
Oh, okay, right. Well, I think when I was talking about it in the last forum, religion is a big one. That literally you have to, in order to feel like you belong, and that's where a number of people will join religions so they could feel like they belonged to something. Or because the system tells you you need to belong to a group And they do push it, says, if you don't have family, find family. If you don't have friends, you're a problematic individual. What it is that they want you to be connected to the plethora of the numerous individuals who are programmed by the matrix, who will make it their job to keep you in the matrix. So if your thoughts expand beyond what is acceptable, something kicks in, you're being weird. Why are you thinking that way? So one, religion, other, this, the whole social situation of family, friends, institutions, businesses, media, we hear, we watch commercials. They said, don't think of anything deep. Think about that nice, shiny new car you want to be driving. That's going to make you special. And yeah, you can get that car and you might feel special for a minute. But they have it set up. You get that latest model of the car, the longer you have it, it's not a late model anymore. And you kind of feel like, that person has a later model of the car, and it makes me feel like maybe I need to put myself in further debt buying another, expensive car to try to impress individuals that aren't worth impressing. They're just basically operatives of the matrix, just to keep you running in a circle, keeping you in that box. So reality, items don't make you special. And the whole concept of happy, they say, okay, I feel happy because I got this thing. But after a while, does that happy wear off? And generally it does. What's more important is your acceptance of yourself in whatever form you're in. And you're not going to be in a lowly form if you have respect and consideration for yourself. You do things that will keep you in a place that you feel comfortable being. I said, well, if you don't care, you'll walk around and and you won't bathe and you won't, no. You're going to do all the things that you need to make your avatar comfortable, keep yourself clothed, keep a roof over your head, and live within your means. When someone said, look at the brand new vehicle I got, man, don't you feel envious? But no, not really. Because that new vehicle you got right now, 2 years from now, it won't be a new vehicle anymore. Expanding my horizon, it's expressing myself creatively, trying to learn things, expand my mental, awareness. And sometimes it'll start with you expanding things that you find out in the matrix. You'll read certain things that the matrix has, even things that are limited having to do with spirituality in the matrix. But if you read some of those things, it may spark other ideas that will cause you to maybe expand beyond the book that you're reading by looking at your experience and observing the experience of others. I talked to a member about the whole concept of celebrity. And there's all these people who want to, and generally younger people who want to be celebrities. But this individual said, well, what I notice about celebrities, they're not happy. But because they're in a box, they don't want to see that these celebrities are not happy. Or there's something that used to annoy me a bit when I would observe somebody. They're looking for my input about something, having to do with relationship and so on. I said, well, yeah, you're in this new relationship, you feel really all into it and so on. I said, but I'm observing from the outside and you're asking my opinion. I said, well, you're going to have to be careful because this individual has a certain way of vibrating or doing things that I don't think is going to be the healthiest for you. He said, no, that's all right. I said, well, people get married and they divorce all the time. Yeah, but our thing is different. Our thing is special. I said, well, you can keep on thinking your thing is special. But from what I read, it's going to end up like most all relationships end up here. Even if people are together over years, there's usually a dominant party in that situation, where there's the male or the female. And somebody is being dominated in that situation. So I don't care if granny and grandpa were married for 70 years or whatever, somebody is getting the short end of the stick. And somebody is not happy in that relationship. But they feel that maybe, I should keep it quiet because it's expected of me to show that, we're together and our relationship works and so on and so forth. And then when everybody's gone and then they're by themselves, they're sitting in the room by themselves crying. So anyway, I'm going to go back, like I have at times, and address the initial question. You can ask that question again.
The question is, what kinds of programs keep people as a boxhead curious about religion?
Okay. Well, I didn't get too far from the subject. Again, uh, literally what I just said, that there is a system, you are in a system that is designed to keep you in the box. So even when we talked about, I talked about, imperialism and so on, they come in, we try to erase everything that particular group knew or survived with, and then replace it with their stuff, which causes a lot of imbalance, a lot of problems. And then, say, well, what we're, giving you is better than what you had. And if someone would say, no, it isn't, here's some reasons, well, we're going to have to get rid of this individual because they're getting in the way of our program of turning everybody in this group or culture into our little box head puppets. So with that, that's literally some of it. There, I can go into little micro details of how people are, end up being stuck in boxes and so on, from even past expressions and so on and so forth. But that's really the short and the long of it at this point. There's a lot of things. The system is designed to keep you and turn you into a box head. Okay. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question and spin that wheel.
Number 10.
Number 10.
Question 10. In Thai, sleep paralysis is called PM, meaning a ghost is playing a trick on you. What is sleep paralysis?
Well, they're not far from the truth with that. It has to do, we can call them ghosts. Um, when I deal with these particular entities, some just considers it, it's just a job. Said, well, if you want to call us ghosts, you can call us ghosts. Our job is to, scare the Jesus out of you and get that essence. And I've had numerous sleep paralysis experiences in the past, and I have to admit that it's a little when it first happened. I definitely went into some kind of panic for a minute, for not even a minute, for maybe I'd say, oh, a few seconds, and then my mind just kicked in. How do I get out of this? Instead of like, I can't move, how do I get out of this? And then I just tried to devise ways of getting out of it, which basically took away from the thing that literally had that button in everyone's avatar where they can just push it, boom, and then you can't do anything. Excuse me. So there are entities on the other side that definitely are involved with sleep paralysis. There are, I've had a number where something would, I would feel it. I would feel a vibration before it would start to happen. And after a certain point, sometimes I couldn't pull myself out of vibration before it would happen. But it would happen. And lo and behold, I feel someone sit on the end of my bed.
Mm.
And this is, I was single, I was living by myself.
Mm.
I had some where I'm at home alone, where I'm usually what happened if I was sleeping on my back. But this particular time, I was sleeping on my stomach and started to go into it. And then you start to feel the presence of some things or someone's in the room. And part of that feeling the presence is part of them getting that essence out of you. They want you to feel their presence. And they can, basically do that. They can, it's like when you feel another person come into a room. You don't have to see that person. You don't even have to hear them, but you'll like feel something, you turn around, and then there's somebody standing next to you, and you didn't hear them come in the room. So they use that same kind of frequency or whatever to startle you. So there are those who, even with the beyond sleep paralysis, sitting in a space, going to a certain space, they're by themselves, and then they feel someone standing next to them, but they don't see that individual. And of course, they get kind of the chills or whatever, and they start to pump out that essence. And that entity starts collecting that essence. Sometimes they take it a little step further. You can't see them, but then they'll, almost like they're leaning into your ear and go, hey, like that. And I've had those voices like that as well. Someone just wake you out of a stone sleep. You may be having a dream or something like that. But then there's something that you know is not a dream, and then hey, and then you wake up, and you'll feel some presence in the room. So there's some pretty intense ones that I had, and over time I tried to figure out what was going on, and there was very little literature back in those days about sleep paralysis. The fact that they even call it sleep paralysis, there wasn't even a name for it during the time when I was in my late teens and my early 20s. And it would happen up until, well, it happened for a while, for a number of decades. And until I got really angry about just the whole thing of being messed with by entities on the other side, yeah, I would just find ways to get out of it. In other words, I would have sleep paralysis, not able to move. But the thing that I tried the first time that it happened would always work. I was just focused on my little finger, put all my focus on that little finger, and then I would move it and break it. And I've noticed that I've heard some other individuals who talk about focusing on a certain part of their body and then doing something very similar.
Mhm.
And they would break out of the sleep paralysis. But I had one where, like I said, usually I would be on my back, and it would be a certain time of the year. Because I lived on the East Coast and the Midwest most of the time. Then I lived on the West Coast for a little bit. And I had it happen in both of these areas, but there was a certain time of the year where it was like almost between summer, like fall or something like that, or spring or something. I don't know how to do with the temperature or something or whatever, where I would have these experiences. And I had one in particular where, like I said, it was on my stomach. I keep starting this one and then zipping off to something else. And the vibrations hit. And one of the things that would happen also, and I never heard anyone talk about this particular experience, where I would hear the voices of people, but it would be people I knew. So I'm on the East Coast, and the people whose voices I hear are on the West Coast. But they're talking to each other, they're not even talking to me. And then from there, I go into a full-blown sleep paralysis. And because I guess maybe when you research, like I said, walking in my book, talk about walking through that door, then they bump things up. If you really try to figure out what the hell they're doing. So this one, all of a sudden, I end up feeling like there's like about 3 babies jumping up and down on my back.
Oh.
Now, infants can't really jump up, like that, but they had, but they seemed like they were smaller than toddlers, but they were jumping up and down on my back. I could feel myself going down and up like that. And then finally, sometimes when they started me like that, like one of the other ones I had, in my mind, I would just say, this isn't happening. And I would repeat that a couple times, and then it would break. So I think they were trying to, get me to fall back into a box of fear of the other side. But when they do things, I analyze it. I say, oh, that worked. They're jumping up and down, and this isn't happening. Or another one I would do is say, get off of me, like that. So I took it from, this isn't happening to get off of me. And I would just, I guess, like, get off of me like that. And it would end. Because they're not getting what they want from you. As far as like anger energy that's focused on them is not the same as fear energy. Anger energy is almost like it's like a bulldozer pushing whatever they're up to out of your sphere. So I'm not afraid, I'm pissed. Why are you messing with me? I'm not afraid of you. So if I could get my hands on you, buddy, oh. I said, wow, he's no fun.
Interesting.
Yeah, and there are individuals who do lose their fear at times of these the haunters or whatever, and they say, yeah, well, after a certain point, they stopped coming. They were just trying to find another way to get to you, but they stopped coming because you're not releasing fear anymore. You're releasing anger. And it's almost, and anger is not a natural thing to the universe, but it's almost like you're protecting your own energy from them by saying, this is mine, get away from me. So you go, oh my goodness, oh, that's what they want. It's really funny, there's a lot of folks that, well, these things came into my room and I wasn't afraid. I said, yes, you were. You totally were afraid, and you can't trick them. It's like with animals, certain like dogs or certain animals will know, could smell, as they say, could smell fear on you. You can be standing there with your legs going like this, shaking. And say, yes, I'm not afraid of you. They go, yes, you are. I can read you. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I talked about this before, moving into a little bit of the ghost and haunting, but it's all connected. There's generally haunters that will come in and they will trigger a sleep paralysis. And the first thing is that, you feel vulnerable. I can't move.
Yeah.
Something can come in here and do things to me, and I'm paralyzed.
Yeah, and the voice doesn't come out from your mouth as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've had them when I was during my first marriage, and I would go into a sleep paralysis. She's sitting laying right next to me. She's asleep, of course. And that is when I was experiencing her sleep terrors, which was worse than my sleep paralysis. I'm laying there and I'm, experiencing sleep paralysis. The thing is like near the bed. And I'm just, I would just try to call her. And in my mind, I'm calling her name, but what was coming out of my mouth was every freaking time. And if she did wake up, she says, I don't know, I thought you were having some weird snoring thing going on. I was trying to tell you to shake me. But of course, with that, then I had to figure out my own way to deal with it. And like I said, he evolved with me. It moved from that to me literally going, get off of me. It was kind of interesting because the mother unit used to fight like that. She would have them. And, and she's the first one that I heard tell me, she's kind of feisty, where she would say, get off me like that. I said, yeah, I kind of, yeah, I can vibe with that. And I would use it, and it would work every time. But I would feel uncomfortable about going right back to sleep. Because, if I go back to sleep, they're going to keep effing with me until they get me into a deep one and a longer one. Because, as a matter of fact, they experiment on you. They see which technique works the best. Or what thing can they trigger that will cause you to puff out essence. But again, if you're working to figure it out, eventually you won't be as afraid. It won't be fun, but you won't be as afraid. They would do stuff where I would have a sleep paralysis local in my room, in my bed. Later, they decided, well, let's do this one, where they would trigger a sleep paralysis, and then also with sleep paralysis, my eyes would be closed, but I could see through my eyelids. I could see the room. They're going to make sure that you see them. So, your eyes closed, and no, we're not going to, no, you can see us through your eyelids. So they started sending me to other locations in the sleep paralysis. So I would, eyes would open, my etheric eyes, I guess, and look into my eyelids. And I'm in some room, in some bed, sometimes on some mattress on the floor or something like that. And I don't recognize the place I'm in. So while I'm trying to figure out where I'm at, they would probably feed from my disorientation, from my concern. And then again, after a while, I got used to that. But when I really turned the tide was when they started, in other words, introducing the sleep paralysis. And this was around the same time I got tired of the haunters coming into my space, without the sleep paralysis and just hovering and just making me extremely uncomfortable. And some of that I talked about as well. I may have talked about this, it may be in the book, I'm not sure, where I figured that a lot of this stuff has to do with messing with my mind. So what if I create something with my mind to deal with these guys? And also just reading other materials and people talking about certain techniques, but those techniques I didn't use, but I said, well, what if I do this instead of what they're doing? And there wasn't a lot of books, again, about sleep paralysis. So at that time, there's one guy whose book that I knew of. And there were others, but this particular individual, this book seemed to, be more interesting to me than some of the other stuff. But I decided myself, I said, well, if it's the mind, then I should be able to manifest something. And that had to do with the sleep paralysis, and it's in the book, where they walked from the shadows and all the way down to the end of my bed. And that was my first doppelganger experience, where an entity walked down my bed that looked like me. The only thing is that he's wearing a jean jacket that I had gotten rid of like 5 years prior. So he wasn't even up to date. So, and at the time, I grew up in a family believed in firearms. Father, was a good old country boy, and they believed in their firearms. So you gotta have your firearm, boy. Sleep with it on your pillow. And I slept with it under my pillow. And this individual He's standing with his back to me. I said, that looks like me, but that's not me. Me is me. Me's here. And I reached under the pillow and I had to really struggle and focus. And I felt the gun, pull it, and I'm going to aim it. And then the gun disappears from my hand. So I just kept doing it until it stuck. And then I literally, in that realm, I pulled the trigger, felt the kick from the gun, boom, like that. But I didn't really shoot the gun really. When I came out of it, the gun was where it was supposed to be. But once I did it, that individual turned around like annoyed, but he looked exactly like me. And then it's almost as though they were trying to make some kind of weird peace with me or something after that. Because like, how the hell did he override this to do that? And that's a testament to my stubbornness. Like, no, I'm gonna keep trying until something happens. And they try to, make peace with me, but if you want to know more about it, you can read in the book, what they did after that. So again, when it comes to sleep paralysis, it's generally triggered by those on the other side. They trigger it because it's about feeding on you or trying to scare you back into a box or something. So I'll just leave that where it's at. I can keep going, with it, but we can move on to the next. Yes,
I have a question.
sure.
So a couple of years ago, someone told me about their experience with sleep paralysis, and they said that three entities were coming in, and
Mhm.
they also said that it is very common that those three entities shows up. One I remember was an old woman who was sitting on the chest. So I was wondering, is it really every time the same entity, or do they just use like this glamour to, I don't know, cause more scare?
Sometimes, yeah, well, sometimes it is the same entity because they can change their image because they know how to do that. They're on the other side. They're not in the lockdown like most of us are in our avatars. So they can come in, as an old lady sitting on the chest, or as a creepy little kid standing by the bed staring at you when you wake up, in the middle of the night. But also, there are those who work as a team. So there's different ones that will come in, come into the space, and and they just literally, it's there's not like a set rule as to how they do things. It's very much like how, in other words, what we experience here is a reflection of that other side. Behaviors and attitudes and how we work well together sometimes and how we work badly together sometimes. And so with this individual, I'm getting with theirs, they had different individuals come through. And it's all to divvy up the essence. And two, depending on his story, I would have to know more about the person. There are individuals that have a track record from a previous expression where certain things haven't finished punishing them yet.
Oh.
So with my first wife, she had night terrors. And I think I was nuts to stay with her as long as I did because they were just horrific. And she was having them every night. Yeah, after a certain point, she stopped having them so much, but but actually, she wasn't having them so much because I would wake out of a stone cold sleep because it would start like this, like that, and like, and then I'm like, she wake up. So she would do that, but I adjusted to it. So as soon I would be totally, I'm totally asleep. I would hear her go, as soon as I heard that, I go and shake her out of it. Now there are some beliefs that individuals who have night terrors, there's one guy who wrote this book that they're running from something on the other side. That they did something on the other side, and they're being harassed from the other side. So after a certain point, we're sharing the bed. It didn't happen that much for for a number of years. Except the last one that happened was really freaky, because she started up and I didn't catch her before she got really going. So she's halfway to like that. And I put my hand there and I shook her, and the thing, said, "You're next." I said, "What the hell?" No. So what are you talking? I didn't do anything. Said, just wake up, okay?
You're next.
Yeah, you're next. Yeah. And she was into some stuff that actually was promoting some of that stuff as well that was going on with her. There are a lot of folks who fool around with dense stuff, dense magic and whatever, and they don't know what the hell they're doing. They don't even know their own history with it. Why they're even attracted to it. In some ways, they're doing things that almost create a throughway for any entity to come in and harass them. But for them, it was a double deal. They get her, and then they get me, because I'm laying right next to this person, and then I'm just getting startled out of my sleep. And I guarantee you, I get startled out of my sleep. I'm quite sure there's some essence of, they got something from me. So with this guy, yeah. As far as like his experience, he just said that he just described what was coming into his room and what he would wake up to. Is that correct, Mimosa?
Yeah. He was just telling me that like whenever he had the sleep paralysis, those entities would be there and he would be just scared of them. And he said that like the old lady sitting on the chest would be like super heavy and stuff like that. But yeah, I thought
Yeah.
it was interesting that he said that a lot of people experience these three particular entities, that it's very common to like see them when they have sleep paralysis.
Yeah, they will use certain glamour because it works. When
Okay.
people write about it, and I think with her, I think they call it the old hag. It's what they call the old lady sitting on it. Says they call the old hag. And there's a lot of stories about the old hag. Now, is it the same entity? No, they switch off. It's like the ghost, the women in white, or the woman, the gray woman in some old castle in Europe or something like that. And it's not the same person all the time. But because humans are gullible enough to believe what this, in other words, who gives you that information? The other side. They give it through someone else. I believe it's the same person, and they died because they had a tragic romance, and then someone got killed, and then she committed suicide, and she just keeps coming back. They like stories. So the individual who actually died in the castle probably hasn't visited that place maybe ever since. There are situations where, for instance, my grandmother Unit had an uncle who died at the age of 23, and the night that he transitioned, he showed up at the foot of her bed. And there are times when individuals do transition, that part of their consciousness will at times visit, can visit someone that they're related to, or that they're, have some kind of relationship with, before they move on to, whatever else density has in store for them. But after that, when individuals would start to see someone show up who looks like a family member, and I've had that happen, where a sibling who sees a lot of things. I was visiting and I was doing some energy work in that area on, that particular property. And she says, "Oh, the mother unit just showed up." I said, "That's not her." And it's, I just pushed right past whatever it was and did what I was going to do. Also, people are fragmented. Everyone here is fragmented from their, their central higher consciousness. So you're a fragment of higher consciousness, and they start to beat you down until you're no longer higher consciousness. You become a dense entity once your energy levels go low enough as a higher consciousness. Then you become a dense entity. So one of the things that will happen also is that you can end up with a fragment of someone hovering around you because you may be dwelling on them. You may be thinking a lot about them. Now, it depends on the person as to whether that fragment is strong enough to make any real difference or talk to you or whatever. It depends on how strongly you're connected and how much you feel you've missed that individual or whatever. And not everybody who misses someone, experiences those fragments, coming, coming through to them. But it doesn't come through most of the time as something visual. It comes through sometimes as a voice in your head, reminding you of something they said. When you start to move in a certain direction, that memory of that person told you, no, stay in this religion. That's our family religion. And if you have that type of feeling towards that person and you're trained to do what they tell you to do, then every time I think about moving from this situation to that situation, they tell me to stay. Or there are certain times where you start to separate from other family units because they're not healthy for you to be around. But something will come in and you'll find yourself still dealing with those individuals. So everything, there's a lot of fragmentation that goes on in this realm, a whole lot of fragmentation. Don't let me get started on AI. Like fragments on fragments on fragments on fragments, fragments. It's little micro fragments. But on the larger picture, that's what the matrix is. You and I, well, I'm not fragmented. If I was fragmented, I wouldn't think and do the things that I do. And also, I didn't come through the same way. And literally had one experience when something was telling me that I was never invited here. And they were trying to get rid of me. And I remember when they were trying to get rid of me. We were kind of trying to get rid of you, but you wouldn't go. So depending on what your experience is, there are certain things that happen, and I'm not going to share much more of that. But I had the inkling that there were things that were trying to remove me, also remove someone else that's in of the family unit that they were trying to remove from this scenario because they didn't like what they were able to do. But this entity said that they were doing it since I was, really little. And I recall that. There are times things will try to segue you into things to interfere with you enlightening yourself. For instance, having certain types of people aggressively trying to pull you into their group. And if you don't have a strong enough will, you might find yourself being pulled by the whole concept of belonging. These people aren't the best people to be around, but they give me attention. Happens with so-called this illusion of romance also. He's giving me attention. He's being nice. That's just an act. No, he's being nice. I said, okay, I'll see you in about a month or two, or maybe even a year. A year later, he's an asshole. It's all programming. They want you to fall for this stuff. They put that glamour out there. They put that, those pheromones, those charismatic pheromones. There's the sexual pheromones, but there's the charismatic pheromones. Where you say, well, or they say the right thing because maybe your jockey's in on it. So this person's higher consciousness is really kind of hard to control. So I'm going to make a deal with these guys to come in and try to block the way. So I had situations when I was a lot younger where individuals would come in and they try to segue me into something where I could possibly get into some scrap with somebody, a serious scrap, where either I would get mortally injured or I would have to mortally injure them. But I had a heads up when I would start to feel that energy building, and then I would just vacate the premises. You know what would happen sometimes? Man, he said that stuff to you know, it was like really dumb stuff back in like the 80s, like having to do with sneakers. This guy stepped on my sneakers, man. Kill that.
Yeah.
I said, well, you don't kill somebody over a pair of sneakers? Really? But what would happen is that, well, you know, he said something about your mama, man. I said, well, that doesn't feel right to me. And later, sticks and stones, bye. I said, man, you a punk, man. You should have. I said, what you should have. But that's the density trying to lead you into something that will literally interfere with your flow. If I ended up in the system, i.e., the jail, a prison, that would really make it difficult for me to do what I do now. Because I have to dig my way out of that crap to get where I am now. So the times when, you know, there's battles, yeah, I did fight, that I felt, well, okay, this one's not going to lead me into a situation where I could get killed or I'll end up having to kill somebody else. Or even understanding the psychology behind bullies. When I lived in New York, I learned the psychology behind bullies. Yeah. Bullies have a lot of fear.
Oh.
And they're going to attack somebody who reacts to their aggressive approach. If you don't react to their aggressive approach, there's a good chance they'll leave you alone. Because they're not psychic. They don't know if perhaps, because people run around with weapons, they don't know if I have a weapon. That's why I'm so calm while I'm walking through the subway. Look at that guy. They go, the other person. That happened more than a few times in New York City when I lived there. You know, these guys are just tools of density. It's all about essence, but also trying to segue me into the system somewhere. And I didn't allow it. So there are times I walked away. And my father, you know, was the kind of guy, you know, that guy, he picked up my brother and I, you know, slapped him around. And then at lunchtime, I got up to the table and sat across him and I took his sandwich and ate it. Why are you eating this shitty sandwich, man? But that was his psychology. That was his mind. And so he thought when I was a little kid, I was a little chicken. But as an adult, he saw me navigating New York City. And he's like, in certain scenarios where he was afraid to go into, I went in with no problem. And it puzzled him. Because box heads want you to fit a box that they make for you. I mean, he even made up lies about, you know, me being chased by a group of kids. I said, I never remember that. I just said, that never happened, man. I said, but I can't tell you, I had a hard time when I was a kid, ducking and dodging bullies. You know, if I couldn't, then I would end up, you know, in a little fight. But most of the time, I would avoid it because I felt that I came here to do something else. Even then, I felt like I came here to do something else. And I made all the right moves, I found out later. That my, to say, I don't want to call it courage, my lack of fear trumped his fear. He realized that he was fearful of things that I was not afraid of. But again, on the other side, if they sense that you're vibrating a little too strong for them, they will send operatives some stranger way out of the blue said, "This guy doesn't know me." He said, "But they're on the same grid that you're on." So they'll send an operative in your direction to try to redirect you back into some box. So anyway, I'm going to leave
Yeah.
that one there.
It's 5:07.
Oh, geez, really? I was having way too much fun. Okay. Well, it's 5:07. Then we're going to roll the questions over to the next forum because I have something very special in store. Nara's going to be telling us some things, and we'll give you a chance to actually just you can rehearse it. Okay, everyone. Thank you for joining the 45th NSTHA as the Chief Forum, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. You're welcome.